All right, I'm here with Wayne for the Midweek Pod. We are talking on Tuesday, the 21st of May, which is officially Viva John Terry Day. How are you enjoying your John Terry Day?
It doesn't seem like it sinks in with him. You know, just how culpable he was in that. You know, he's like, oh, he was disappointed. I don't feel like the gravity. You know, you can see we've seen it from our own players and disappointment where they talk about Anfield and Upton Plovk in the 90s. And you know that the gravity is there with them. Like how many of them, in a peculiar way, are frustrated by what happened at Wembley against Barcelona, even though that was far from Fergie's best side. But they talk about it like it's a massive what-if moment because it weighs heavily on the player's mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to weigh heavily on Terry's mind that he cost his team the Champions League through his own ego. And it's funny. The day's funny itself in terms of, well, first of all, with the penalty, but I think there are things that we all like about supporting United, and one of them is, I would hope so. I'm not sure how much you buy into this. You might think I'm a bit of a romantic fool with it, but there are certain elements of United's history that are romantic and not contrived. They appear to be contrived, like winning the treble on Sir Busby's birthday and then winning this European Cup in Moscow against Roman Abramovich, considering that's all that he took over Chelsea to do. So we went there and beat him in his backyard. We did it in a way that it was sort of dramatic in time-honoured United fashion, and also Ryan Giggs breaking the appearance record on the nights past Bobby Charlton. Those kind of elements, even the drama of Ronaldo being the best player in the world and missing the penalty, all that sort of stuff is it's quintessential United, really. It's got all the elements of a little bit of thing in there. So, it's exactly.
Football is narrative, isn't it? So these things are... The magic thing about John Terry is, I mean, he contrived it, as you said. He altered the order so he could take the fifth penalty because he wanted to be the captain who won the European Cup. That's how arrogant he is, and he doesn't recognize that because he is the least self-aware person I know. Perhaps, and forgive the comparison, perhaps, like there's a few narcissists in the political sphere, like, you know, say Boris Johnson or Donald Trump, that might match John Terry for lack of self-awareness.
He's like
he has almost none. And so, he contrives it to take the fifth.
Yep.
He walks up, he adjusts his armband, and he falls over.
Yeah, it's also almost like he's been living outside of the sphere of what everyone else recalls about that game, because it's like, that was the moment, and it wasn't the moment for him. So I'm like, well, how have you been engaging in the football media since... do you literally exist in your own bubble? Maybe he does, because look, there's one thing I can say about John Terry. It's a positive thing for him, is that he was disturbingly consistent as a defender, like resolute. He was literally like a brick wall sometimes. He was that good a defender, and I guess to have that kind of consistency, you would just want to shut out the entire world. Though, you know, he seemed impervious to thoughts about his fallibilities and weaknesses because, you know, he wasn't the fastest and he wasn't the most technically gifted, but he was an amazing central defender. You can't deny that. And I wonder if maybe that part of it. Anyway, you know, I'll tell you one thing to deviate, because I know, Ed, you said before that you're worried about filling the time that we've got. You should never worry about that with me. Because I'll always ramble. I'm going to take you on a little diversion. See,
you are like a gas filling a vacuum, aren't you? Yeah.
This is because I said gas bagging before we came on air, and you've immediately applied that to me, which I'm so gracious for. Thank you. No, I wanted to just take a second because it's a weird thing, Moscow, for me. Quite aside from the memory we've all got of experiencing it and loving it for what it was. So about 6-7 years ago, and I'm glad that I'm talking about this like a week after Mental Health Awareness Week, because first of all, I always try and, so that I'll post about it when it's happening, but I always think that you do that, but mental health awareness is every single day, really, and we should be more conscious of that and reach out more to our friends about that on a more regular basis than what we do. Yeah, it's good to have the awareness, but it's also good to do it more regularly. So I'm only a few days away from mental health awareness, but I want to tell you this story just because it was on my mind this morning. So the word Moscow to me, it's been a different kind of way. So a few years ago, I'd just finished the final draft of the Jimmy Murphy book, and I was it was coming out in 2018, so it was around. So it's just before would have been late 2017, just after I'd finished the Jimmy Murphy book. Is ready to be published, and we're coming up to the 10th anniversary of Moscow, and I thought, oh, do you know what? I should write a book on that, because it won't come out in time for the 10th anniversary, but maybe the 15th anniversary once I've completed the draft and done the interviews and done all my research and everything like that. But so I spent most of the next year writing that book. I had a lot of personal difficulties throughout that year, so much so that like halfway through the year, I just stopped working on everything. I wouldn't say that I had a close to a breakdown, but I just stopped. I was struggling really, really badly at the time. And I did eventually pick up. I actually got pushed into working again, except there was a period where I wasn't working at all. In fact, I was so depressed that I'm sorry to say this really down when we're talking about John Terry, but we'll bring you back up in a minute.
No.
Yeah, around that time, I wasn't barely even leaving the house. I was really, really depressed. But very fortunately, I got pushed back into working by BT Sport, the director Tom Boswell, because that was around the time we were doing Too Good to Go Down, the film. So I literally had to go out and do the interviewing and the research and started writing.
Yeah.
So I was writing the book concurrently to come out at the same time as the film. So I was suddenly propelled into a period of being really busy. And I still, because of the nature of writing, because of the period of time, and I was, self-employed, and writing, as Dan will tell you when he's on, like, if you're relying on writing as an income, it's very, very difficult at the best of times, even if you keep yourself busy all the time. But if you take downtime and you're not being paid, that's going to come back and get you. And it did. So a long period, I was struggling for a long time after that, the consequence of not working. So that was a struggle. And then I had a couple of other periods, which were early 2020, just before the coronavirus, and then early 2022, some family things. It was really, really difficult to go through. But at the time, when I was going through those periods, the only thing that was going through my mind was Moscow. And what that meant to me was, don't let what happened to you last time happen. You have to work twice as hard. You have to make sure that you're working all the time. First of all, it's healthy to do that. Not if it can be unhealthy, but for me, it can be healthy if I just throw myself into it, push myself through it. Because obviously the alternative wasn't an healthy solution to wallow. Because it hit me doubly hard, suffering at the time and suffering financially later. So I was putting myself into that. And thankfully, that was healthy for me. Those 2 periods where I did that, some of my most productive work, some of my best work has come from that. Like Duncan Edwards' book came from that period, the George Best's book, and some of the books that not yet published, which there's 2 that I think are my best ever work, and that's come from that period as well. The point is that I do refer back to Moscow, and so this book, by the way, is finished. The Moscow book that I wrote is finished. It's unpublished. It's just sat there. And every now and again, I mean, twice I've posted a chapter or 2 of it on my blog just to see what the reception would be to it. Every now and again, I toy with the idea of just putting it out as a PDF. But I can't bring myself to go back to it and edit it or do anything else with it because it's so reminiscent of what that period is for me. So now even thinking about us winning the European Cup, and we're talking about a period 10, 12, 13 years removed from that I'm feeling different things associated with it. So it is a very strange day for me when I look at that, because I think there's half of me I'm reflective over in a bad way, because I think, that's a very negative thing. It's a good reminder of myself to know what healthy procedures that I put myself through in order to make sure that I don't struggle in the same kind of way. I really don't know what the point is of the ramble here, only to say that, it's things like this, all like I'm saying when I introduce what I'm talking about, that it's not designated to a week. It's something that goes on every single day of the year, and there can be unexpected triggers that hit you in kinds of different ways.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is that this is the same for every single person. Not that this is my personal experience, but every single person has unexpected triggers for all kinds of different things, and they can be positive and negative at the same time, because life isn't linear. It's complicated. There are all these different things. And yeah, just the point. I always say it all the time. Reach out to people. Talking is always the first step to a better solution. And that's what I did, and it helped. And working helped for me. Might not always work for everyone else. Talking always is the first step. I would recommend that. Yeah, it's just a weird thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Yeah. No, it's important. I mean, it's point of reference for you, and both a negative and a positive experience. It sounds like, highly productive period, and to step away from being super serious for a second. If John Terry ever wants to come on the pod and talk about his experience in Moscow and reflect on what happened to him, we'd welcome him with open arms, wouldn't we? We'd get the whole crew together.
At the same time, I would be quite happy if he showed a human side to the experience that he went through. I might have a little bit of compassion for him, but he's, like you said earlier, he's lacking of self-awareness. It's like, you cost your team the European Cup through your own ego. I mean, I can't remember. I know people talk about that with Bayern, don't they? The last 10 minutes that they were sort of showing off a little bit in the final, and that sort of cost them mentally. But there was nothing compared to what Terry did. Nothing compared to what he did. It was just madness.
No, because that was a collective. And I mean, I also think about when Terry retired, and how he arranged to come off.
Oh my God!
And have a guard of honor.
Yeah, I forgot all about that until you brought it up. Oh my God!
Special. We would give him a guard of honor onto this podcast just to make fun of him for it. No, I mean to have a serious conversation about his career. Yeah. What an odious man. He would be in my top 3 most odious people in football. He easily, maybe in the top 1. I wish him nothing but professional misery. Personally, I don't wish that on anyone, but professional misery, yeah. Which he's done quite well at, he's achieved nothing with his coaching career. So
who else sits
maybe
in the
he's
top
doing
3?
it all on his own.
Luis Suarez. Yeah.
Luis Suarez would be right up there, yeah.
There'll definitely be someone. Joey Barton.
Just think about another one.
He's straight in at number 1.
Oh God, he's horrible. Yeah. Hey, he was horrible through his career, and horrible, and absolutely. Yeah.
There we go.
He would also be in the top 3, and he's. Thankfully, he's going to disappear because he played his card. He shot his shot. Going down the anti-women, misogynist, that kind of whole route, and he doesn't have the personality or charisma to pull it off, so he's just disappeared, and he can't do it again because no one will be interested. So yes, thankfully we won't hear much from him, and except when he's opening a Woolworths or something. Woolworths doesn't exist anymore. There, I just edged myself.
Well,
but
he's aged himself as well, so he probably belongs in a year of Woolworths. And I realise that I'm being quite condescending to Woolworths. I don't mean that. I loved Woolworths. I loved going in again, the pick and mix and everything. I'm sorry, well, let's see. You don't deserve to be lumbered in with Joey Barton.
Oh. No, I'm very sorry for doing that. I'll probably get sued now. Does it exist anywhere as a brand anymore? I don't know. Let's move on. It's 16 years now? 16 years since Moscow. I would tell you what I did on that particular day, because I didn't have a ticket for the final. I went to a watch party, but I can't repeat the rest on air.
Good.
It was a good party, let's just say that. It was a good party, yeah. We all had a great time. All right, so that's Moscow. We were also going to talk, we're going to get onto the Cup final. We will do a preview of the City Cup final. I think both Wayne and I are reluctant to talk about it too much, but a few other things. It is coming up on the 25th anniversary of 99. I guess by this time in 99, we'd won the league and the FA Cup with...
No, it's 22nd.
Cup to come. Had we won the FA Cup? Yeah, so. European Cup was on the 26th, wasn't it? Right, 22nd. All right. So when this goes out, it would be the 25th anniversary of United 2, Newcastle 0 in the FA Cup final, and obviously Camp Nou and the European Cup final to come. But a couple of good things to talk about here. New documentary out on Amazon. I'm sure everyone has heard about it. I must be one of the few United fans on the planet to have not found time to watch this yet. I know Dan has, and you have, and you have a complimentary podcast out on the United app, and soon to be arriving on all good podcast apps and bad ones. And so if you're not listening to this podcast on repeat, which I know many listeners do,
I have
something
one
like that, maybe you'll find time to go and listen to repeat. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I know. Occasionally, I force myself to listen to it as well because quality control and all of that. So, like many people, I hate listening to myself. So, tell us about your work on this podcast. And what you covered
complimentary only in the fact that it's out at the same time. But I will say that I did have conversations with the makers of the documentary about including some of the audio, because obviously word has got around about the archive that I've got, and word got around to the team there, and we had some conversations about using some of the audio, but it was quite late in the day. It was only earlier this year, and they were in post-production, and the turnaround of the conversations, they were dragging a little bit. I don't think that I had a lot of questions. I want to have a lot of sort of creative control about the way that the audio is used. I've got a responsibility to Tom Tyrrell's family to do that. And I wouldn't, because I wasn't involved in that process. That process had already happened. So I think they had more of a definite idea of they wanted to listen to bits because they had ideas where they needed bits. And that's where they would put it in. And it just didn't work out in the end. But that means that there's a lot of audio that was left over for the podcast. So as everyone knows, obviously I've got this archive. I used a bit of it for the Munich podcast that came out through the club earlier in the year. There's a lot of audio for this season, loads of it. I decided to concentrate on a creative reason on the 10 days around the trophies. So starting a couple of days before the actual league. So the decision for that was
the Spurs game.
There was a real good chunk of audio that had been taken. There had been a press day when the team were training at Old Trafford, so the press had been invited to go, and Tom was there with his microphone, and he interviewed most of the players in depth. And obviously, because of the access that he had, he interviewed them at various stages afterwards as well. And what was really nice about that, so there's a lot of audio. So maybe there's 10 hours of audio throughout the entire season, but there's 2.5 over the last 10 days. There was a lot of it where he's talking to all the players and they're talking in depth, and all of the players are on, and Sir Alex was on. I decided to keep the Sir Alex stuff back because I wanted to just keep this for players. And there's a nice sort of naivety there of, like, they know that they're on the verge of history. For the first time, they're actually talking about the treble and everything. They know the enormity of it. They're talking about it quite openly. A lot of it is the sort of generic football. There's 3 cup finals and everything like that. But there's a lot of nice things in there as well. Beckham talking about his family. Neville doing some good battle cries. It's just some really nice lines. And I thought, do you know what? It'd be really good to sort of, it does make you feel like you're in the moment, and it takes you back to that. There's been so much that's been made on the treble, a couple of films, a couple of documentaries. I know Dan himself was in one that shows on MUTV quite regularly. I actually watched it, with the same name as the documentary that he was in as well. So there's all these things. There's a lot of things that have been made, so it's very difficult. And I know we'll talk about the documentary in a moment. Difficult to sort of tell the same story again. So this podcast, the audio gave me an opportunity to tell it in a different way, which is just place them before it happens. So you're actually with them. You feel that naivety. You feel like they're not quite sure how it's going to affect them, if they can even do it. Because like now, when you listen to and watch everything in retrospect, we all know that they're leading to the Ollie moment. We all know that they've all got their own personal narratives and redemption arcs and everything like that. Where this is a moment where they don't know how it's going to end. And I'm not going to give it away. I mean, I've posted one of the teasers online today, just a very short clip of my favorite quote from the whole thing, which is a quote from Ollie. So I've directed all the people to go and listen to this after they've listened to the podcast. It's such a beautiful line.
I caught
and he
that.
says that line, again, I'm not going to ruin it, but he says that line after the Spurs game. So he's celebrating the league title win, and this is still 10 days before the European Cup final. So to say something like that, and there'd even been a line, I didn't use it in the end, but because it was too far behind, it was like, I think it was March 98, where Tyrrell was talking to Jordi Cruyff, and obviously Cruyff was on loan at Celta Vigo at that point. But he talked about, Cruyff was downbeat. It was in that moment, in that period when, he might have different recollections looking back at it now, but in that moment, whenever Tom was talking to him, he was always downbeat about how much game time he was missing. And now he was struggling to settle in England. So Tom was trying to make him feel better and saying, well, you might be a substitute, but you might get to score in the final as a substitute. And that'd be the dream if you weren't going to start. So and that was March 98. So they was sort of discussing it in that kind of way, that wouldn't it be strange if a foreign player came on and scored a winner as a sub in the Champions League final. So for that to happen, as they did it in May, obviously a different player, but the Solskjaer line is similarly prophetic. And I just thought, when I heard that for the first time, I thought, considering none of this has been heard this century until it's actually out now, that these are great lines in United history. I mean, if we were all aware of that line, it'd be one of those that we'd be talking about all the time. We'd bring it up all the time because of how he says it and because of how resonant it is just a few days later. So, I think once I'd heard all that sort of stuff, I was like, I definitely want to put it out. And thankfully, the reaction to the Munich podcast was so strong earlier in the year that they'd sort of let me sort of play with it a little bit. There's a podcast producer at United, Nick Thompson, who I want to give a lot of praise to, because he does a lot of great work, and he did a lot of great work on this podcast as well. Really helped. Okay, well, I'm giving credit where it's due. I'm really proud of it. It's out now. It's a nice, like I said, it's an aperitif to the documentary. It's definitely, if you feel like the documentary is a bit familiar because you haven't seen all the stories, you definitely haven't heard anything that's on this podcast yet. So have a listen to it.
This will be different. Yeah. Great. The Solskjaer line is incredible. I mean, he says, to paraphrase, I hate being a substitute, just listening to my heartbeat. And he, and of course, not to ruin it too much, but it is very prophetic. One of those things you expect someone to pull out a scene from The Simpsons where Ollie Solskjaer comes on and scores a winner in the last minute or something like that. They knew it'd happen. I'm very much looking forward to watching the documentary. I'm sure 90% of the listeners already have, so I'll get around to it, and looking forward to listening to a lot of the archive audio you've got. I mean, I think we forget. I think at the time I was trying to recall my memories of it all, because it's a period of time where I went to a lot of football, but I missed a lot of this season because I was in Scotland at university. I always felt there's a kind of sense of inevitability about winning the league and the cup, because I didn't think much of Spurs or Newcastle as teams, but never felt that way about the Champions League final. But of course, it just wasn't really true, was it? Because we came 2 brilliant goals away from not winning the league that season. I mean, if you think, went down to Spurs, who weren't much of a team. I can't remember where they finished exactly in the league table that year. But it took a brilliant goal from Beckham, bending it the wrong way into the top corner, as we've seen plenty of times from him, and a really good finish from Andy Cole as well to actually win that. And so it wasn't inevitable. And I don't know whether listeners felt differently or you felt differently at the time, but I had a very strong feeling about that one. And then the cup final,
but also
massive favourites.
The route
against
there
not particularly good Newcastle side.
I mean, we had to beat Liverpool, we had to beat Chelsea, we had to beat Arsenal. 2 of those games went to replays. One of them was turned around in the last minute. So there was. I know what you mean about that. The Newcastle game obviously felt like it was the easiest of the 3 tasks, or the most comfortable of the three tasks. But even that, when Keane went down injured very early on, you're thinking, and I think Sam missed that game as well. Well, he definitely didn't start it because he had the Achilles problem. So there was an element of risk there. But yeah, it definitely felt the most comfortable of the 3. Spurs, I remember that we played Middlesbrough in '96 away, and there was all the talk that they would roll over for us because of Robson and Anderson. Viv Anderson was still on the staff there. They had a healthy United connection, and obviously there was Newcastle who we were fighting against. So I think it's funny, isn't it? You have so many crucial games, like we saw last weekend with Arsenal and then Spurs with City, that, these games kind of align in a curious way, that they will have you questioning rivalries and commitment in a very real way, by the way. I mean, I will say that nobody could say that Spurs' effort, even though the Spurs fans were equally as conflicted, because I think the famous recollections are that there were groans in the away end when Les Ferdinand scored, and you can understand that, but you couldn't fault Spurs' application on the day, because first of all they did go goal up, and Spurs were complaining incessantly about the award of the equaliser, because there's a foul in the build-up. I think Scholes pushes someone over. And they were like, they were not letting that go. They were really complaining about it. But even then, when they probably
need retrospective VAR on this, don't we?
United, when they scored early on in the second half, a great goal by Cole, like you said, then the last 10, 15 minutes were really nervous. I wouldn't say there was an onslaught from Spurs, but United retreated into themselves, and they weren't a plethora of chances or anything like that, but Spurs were on top and they were looking for an equaliser, and they could have got one. So they didn't roll over. They would have been quite happy if United had won the league, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's a problem with that. But it was not an easy game. In the end, on the podcast, got Gary Neville saying it was a 4 or 5-1 performance from United, that we really deserved to win by a few more goals. Because I think if you watched the first half back, Scholes misses there's a couple of really good chances he misses within 20 seconds of each other. United just they bombarded looking for that equaliser. And when they got it, obviously they tried to control the game. And by shade, obviously the Bayern game was by far the least comfortable of the 3. But I don't look at that and think that it was a comfortable ride. I think at that time, British football was becoming so competitive, like post-Bosman, English football, I should say. obviously the death knell of Scottish football was Bosman, more or less. But Chelsea had one of their greatest teams. They just won the Cup Winners' Cup, and they'd had a massive. This is how cultured this podcast is. Chelsea's invasion of foreign players preceded this line. There was, I think it was a Christmas game later that year, 99, but a Christmas game between Chelsea and Arsenal, and it was the first game, I think, that didn't start an English player on either side, or definitely Chelsea didn't start one. And the reporter for that game, and I forget who it is, but I always remember the line, quoted Yeats, a terrible beauty is born. Yeah, that's how cultured this podcast is. And I love that line because it completely did transform the English game in terms of the foreign invasion. But they had that at the time, and at the time this was culturally good because they had Oli and Vialli and all that sort of stuff. So there were a lot of teams that were sort of, yeah.
They were fairly glamorous, weren't they? Yeah. I remember a few years later when Peter Kenyon became CEO at Chelsea, he said, we're a continental club that happens to play in London. Line always struck me as a bit of a weird one. Yeah. I'm not sure Chelsea fans quite match
Not
that.
Yates, is it? It's not Yates.
So, yeah. No. It's not. No. I wonder if John Terry's ever read any Yates. It strikes me as unlikely. I used to live very near his old house in Hampstead.
You're talking a lot about John Terry on this podcast. So, there's a lot of John Terry resentment riding, which is fine. I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think about John Terry all of it. No, I really don't.
Yeah.
Except once a year on John Terry Day. Magic. All right. I'm afraid we've wasted 30 minutes here yapping along about mental health, John Terry, Moscow, and 99, and we're going to have to talk. No. Okay, you're going to fix something in before
because you haven't asked me for my thoughts on the documentary. Saturday. We were talking about our memories of the Treble. Yes,
Oh, yeah, you're right. I have not. Please tell me your thought. We had Daniels on the last podcast. He gave us a brief synopsis.
I felt...
Yeah, what did you make of it?
It was good. I felt it's enjoyable for... If you weren't there... So, like the Beckham documentary, I presume you've got around to seeing the Beckham documentary by now. Okay, thank God for that then.
I have seen that one, yeah.
But I'm sure, like me, you felt... maybe this is just something that comes to my mind as like having worked as a ghostwriter, that there's a perception of like you have your lived experience of something and someone else's perception of the same experience when they've lived through it as a main protagonist, particularly in the case that we're talking about David Beckham, that he was curious to see some of the recollections through his documentary, like the perception that United fans didn't get behind him until Inter Milan, whether that's a dramatic retelling or not. And then, of course, you've got the intention of the storyteller, the director. What's the story that they're trying to tell? They will always bring different details to the fore. And so those storylines become more important, whereas, the storyline of your mind might be quite different. And I would think that, we've all got universal agreement on what the main themes were for the storytelling aspects of the treble season. You've got Roy Keane's return, you've got Schmeichel's retirement, you've got Ollie leaving and scoring a winner, you've got Cole nearly leaving, but striking up this relationship with Dwight York. You've got Fergie nearly resigning on the start of the season and then being backed with 30 million, the B-Sky Beast to take over. You got a lot of these terrible form in the first half of the season, great run, form in second, and then some of the greatest games in the club's history. A little sprinkle of all that is in the treble story, but there are certain elements of the documentary series that I found myself sometimes struggling with because it didn't match my recollection of it. I'm like that. I'm not sure that happened quite like that. And while I'm sat thinking like that,
right,
the story's moving on because it's running with it. It's running with what he's talking about. So while you're trying to find your feet again because it doesn't seem familiar, it sort of jumps into the next thing. And maybe I'll have to watch it again because sometimes you wonder where are they going with this because it doesn't quite seem right. And you know where they.
Yeah, well, storytelling and like, you know, an accurate description of history are two different things. I mean, in the Beckham documentary, and we talked about it at the time, didn't we? That the narrative they told in that documentary about here the United fans not being behind him until Inter Milan was obviously nonsense. I remember from the first day of that season, every time he took a corner, you know, rapturous applause for Beckham and chants going around, and you know, the fans were very much behind him. And so that was just about telling the arc and the redemption arc, and it would have been boring if it was like, and he was a hero from the beginning and a hero right towards the end. And I think Dan's thoughts on the 99 documentary was that it was a bit too scripted and he didn't like the lines that felt like ghost written before the players.
No, I definitely completely agree. And you can also tell where they are as well, because obviously you've got natural conversation, but then you've got some that do seem planted. And I think they're the ones that, and it's difficult because what I'm sure Dan is saying it from the same angle as me, and you would be as well when you're looking at it, is it's kind of like, because we've worked on this kind of thing before, you think, I might have done that a little bit differently, you know, like, I feel like that you felt like it was building to something, and you yourself in your head would have gone one direction, they've gone a slightly different direction. Sometimes it's like, I don't feel it's packed that kind of punch for me. And maybe that's all that it is, because I think that, I think by and large, you would watch it and feel the nostalgic pull. I just think, I just feel like it misses a couple of notes and a couple of beats sometimes. And I remember I interviewed Matt Dickinson for the book that he did on the Treble, and it's a great book. It's beautifully written. Right. It was there all the time. But I also, there were some aspects in the book that I just found, for example, just one little example, and it's really meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And then we can move on to talk about City. This is the kind of detail that I'm talking about from me as a supporter. I feel is important and never gets mentioned. And I'm not saying it has to be mentioned in every Treble documentary. I just feel like the eye of the detail sometimes. This is where you miss the beat. With Sheringham in the semi-final against Juventus, home to Old Trafford, just before Giggs scored the equaliser. Have we talked about this? I feel like I bored you with this before. Sheringham scores a goal and he's flagged offside. But at the time, everyone thought that he was onside. And I'm pretty sure that the players were inconclusive. Could bring back ball for that one. So in the final, when Sheringham scores, there's a quick look at the flag. No one ever mentions that. No one ever mentions the significance of that.
Yeah, he does.
And he goes back to the semi-final, and also the semi-final against Arsenal, where the reason why we've got to play replay is because of a bad linesman's decision, because Giggs skins Dixon, which is great skill, and sets up Roy Keane, but he's flagged offside for receiving his own pass. And those two things rarely get mentioned. And I'm not saying that they're massive in terms of the narrative. When they don't get mentioned at all, and because I feel like he's the ebb and flow of how everything was moving, and just those little subtle things that you pick up on, like Sheringham just glancing over. We all know why that was, and I feel like it never gets mentioned. And I just feel like if you mention that, then you've got that detail right. You're paying attention to it. I don't know. I did really enjoy it. It's really good for what it is, but I feel like you really get one chance when you've got all the budget, all the people, all the time in the world. You got 3 hours to tell that story. And I'm just saying I would have done it a little bit differently. But I did enjoy it, you know.
Fair enough. Well, the Beckham doc was like pure fan service, so I enjoyed it for that. without, it wasn't deeply insightful or anything. But it was, it was that.
Yeah.
And, I'm looking forward to the 99 one for that reason alone, Talking about retrospective VAR, I did see someone on Twitter point out that if you could do retrospective VAR, Fergie probably would have won 7 league titles in a row. Because of being robbed against Chelsea when Didier
Even the
Drogba
mega story was
97 yards offside, and unbelievable, just unbelievable, and also when David De Gea took one in the face against Blackburn and they scored the winner, and we lost that league title by a point. So there you go. We're claiming 7 in a row. And then probably a couple of others once finally in 2025 Manchester City get relegated down to the National League for their rampant cheating that has allowed them to win 4 Premier League titles. I say win. I'm not even count it. They stole 4 league titles in a row through systematic rampant cheating, the like of which we've never seen before.
Are you trying to get one of the letters?
Hopefully we'll never see
trying to get
again.
one of the letters from their team.
Now, since I brought...
Yeah, you're so flagrant with it.
Cease and desist. Yeah, hopefully, I'd love one of those. I'd wear it as a badge of honor. Hey, if they want to take me to court for saying this, great, because in the discovery process, we'll come out with all these documents that they've been trying to hide for many years. So feel free, lawyer the fuck up, Manchester City, and come after me. I'm sure there's quite a few United supporting lawyers would happily represent me pro bono, please. Thank you. All right, let's talk of kidding, I'm joking, allegedly, etc. and so on. We've got a cup final against them. For those of you who haven't caught it and would like to, we did a Patreon backers special with Darnish talking about the tactical approach here and how United might approach this game and whether we can win. Can't say any of us were very confident about it. How are you feeling? We're 4 days before the cup final. Have you had your second wind of confidence? Yeah, we're going to win.
Yeah, I feel like I've had
that's
it.
going to happen.
I don't know if it's passed yet and reality's kicked in. Have we not got another documentary to talk about? I do. I can tell you about one. No, okay. Let's
yeah. Have you watched the Manchester City self-produced documentary on their Treble season?
No, Ed, I have not. I am going to tell you.
That shite.
I have to do it because it's on my mind. I did watch like a brief 6-minute. So on YouTube, there are historic news clips from sport news from back in the day. There's something from the Irish League in the early 90s. A guy.
Okay.
I can't believe I'm telling you this. This seems like the ultimate delay tactic. I will talk about the cup final in a second. But it's just because it's on my mind and we'll talk about documentaries, even though it's not one. So the guy who owned the main sponsorship deals or he was running the main sponsorship deals for the League of Ireland. You might know this, you might not. He'd gone over, I think, Pat something or other, an Irish bloke. He went over to America. He spent some time with Colonel Sanders and he got the trademark for KFC. So he came back and he sponsored the League of Ireland, the KFC League of Ireland. But he also decided to own Limerick FC and paid those players. But then it was discovered that this guy was, I think it's Pat Casey, I think it is. He was using the wrong ingredients in the fried chicken. So KFC had a legal battle with him and he had to sort of cease and desist from calling it his chicken couldn't be called KFC anymore, so it was called Famous Fried Chicken. So the League of Ireland got changed to Famous Fried Chicken League of Ireland. It actually got changed to that, and then later on, I think it just became his League of Ireland. And then there's a big problem with Limerick. Anyway, that's what I want. Anyway, FA Cup final. That's on YouTube. You can find that out if you're interested, because I don't even know how it ended. I watched it all and I'm like, I don't understand. So I was Googling it. I couldn't understand how it ended. So if someone is familiar with that story, please tell me, because I am sincerely dying to know about it. So the FA Cup final, second wind.
I fully enjoy minor leagues or non-leagues being sponsored by absolute randoms. Famous fried chicken, KFC, like Bob's.
You would enjoy that story. It's fantastic. It's got all the elements of non-league nobodies trying to act like they're somebodies, but doing it in the top league in the country. It's just incredible. Second win, FA Cup final, no more diversions. There are two theories that I got on board with, and when it looked like Ten Hag would be dismissed after the Palace defeat, which I thought was going to happen. I didn't know how he survived that week. The first one was that he is dismissed and McLaren looks after the team for the rest of the season, but they bring in Fergie to do the team talk for the final, which I thought is actually not a bad idea. And then the other one was obviously yeah.
You won't even be able to touch it, lads. Can't even look at it. That kind of team talk.
You won't look at it.
Has he ever done one like that before?
Find another way to try and win, because you're not going to touch the ball all game. Or the other one was bring Ollie back because of his knowledge of beating City in the big games. But then I looked at that and I thought, that was with that. I realised how absurd this is going to sound. That was with players like Martial, Dan James, McTominay and Fred. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want those players in a United team, but those were the players that were the keys to the victories when we had so many of them. And I don't know if Solskjaer could get a tune out of this collection. Well, we've seen what tunes he tried to get out with his latter sides against City, and they did not work very well. So, am I now confident that Ten Hag is going to get a result over them? Well, the old adage is that you have to have a good run of form going into big games. We weren't perfect against Brighton by any stretch of the imagination. We weren't really perfect against Newcastle either, but we're scoring goals. And with each single individual player that comes back into the team, there is an incremental improvement that looks quite significant. Is it significant enough that I have confidence that we're going to not get battered against City? I'm still not sure. Does City look particularly good themselves lately? They don't. But that, to me, seemed like a bit of a red herring, because, like saying, they're just going to have all the ball anyway, and it's a matter of what we do without the ball. My investigation for positivity is relying on things like, is it mathematically likely that we can lose 2 FA Cup finals in a row against the same team? That kind of thing. That's where I'm trying to find my optimism, rather than anything to do with the players or the strategy.
Oh,
exactly.
Which tells you where I am. Straw clutching, right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm no more confident than when we did the tactics pod yesterday. In that, I'm finding it very hard to see a way through. I'd be a lot more confident if Ollie was in charge, and that's got nothing to do with, because his coaching credentials are not better than Ten Hag's in theory. I mean, they're not really worse, but it's much more to do with my lack of faith that Ten Hag will find a clever or different solution to the problems that Manchester City posed, and that have routinely resulted in getting battered by them. Not every single time we've played them under Ten Hag, for sure, definitely not, and not in last year's cup final either. It wasn't close, but it was close, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Score was close, their performances weren't really, but we've routinely been battered by them as well. 3-1, 3-0 this season. I don't think we really touched them at all. Obviously, an even larger result at one point against them, and I think, like, his plan Bs. So if plan A was something like Onana, Dalot, Varane, Martinez, Wan-Bissaka, Mainu, Casemiro, Garnacho, Fernandez, Højlund, and Ahmad, maybe, or maybe not. If that is plan A, his plan B will be something like chuck Amrabat in and play Bruno Fernandes as a false nine, which doesn't really work very often when he's tried it. Or Scott McTominay, and will likely result in us having 20% possession and still no shots. So that is why I'm not feeling very confident, because the plan A would leave us open, and the plan B is really shit. And I wish there was a plan C, which probably involves Bruno spanking on him from 40 yards.
Vibes was the only one. So
vibes,
yeah.
Vibes is good enough. I'll go with that.
I share apprehension on the tactical plan. I look at what we've done recently, and he started with Bruno and McTominay as that false nine. And part of me was looking at that thinking, he's giving Højlund a rest. But then he hasn't given Garnacho a rest, apart from taking him off, and he hasn't given Manu a rest. So it leads me into thinking...
It was odd, wasn't it?
It's a tactic for the final, because obviously we're not going to have a lot of the ball, and it means killing the game for as long as we can, asking players to be tactically disciplined. And that's my big concern, because very, very, very rarely do we put in a shift where we look tactically disciplined. It happens. It does happen. It can happen. It did happen at Liverpool earlier in the season. But I'm pretty sure Bruno was suspended for that game. And that was a reason for, as good as and as important as Bruno is, that was a big reason for the tactical execution of that game plan. Now, if he's playing as a striker, a de facto striker, and McTominay is the other one, the thing is, McTominay doesn't have any discipline. Casemiro will get pulled around. So then you're thinking, do you start Amrabat instead of Casemiro? Because Amrabat has had 2 6 out of 10 performances, and they've been the best that he's had for the club. It's a very, very difficult one. And I look at that and I worry that if that's the game plan, we don't have the concentration, really. And I'm talking like, not just like this collection of players. Manchester United, historically, in their identity, have like this capability to shoot themselves in the foot. So you're almost better gambling on the sort of chaos theory, because really that's where I'm not saying the sound investment is, but it almost feels like it's the most positive,
definitely be the most positive approach. The problem is if we give up. We gave up 17 shots against Brighton, and that was against the Brighton side.
Yeah.
A Brighton side that's not playing very well, has just finished below their rivals, Crystal Palace, with the manager on the way out, and all the players knew it. They're already on the beach. I think we can step back a couple of days afterwards and go, yeah, there were reasons for why Brighton might be pretty terrible. And they still they outpassed us for an hour and made us look silly until we scored, And, I feel Chaos Ball's probably United's best attempt. I don't think we can put 11 men behind the ball, defend for the entire game, keep City out, not get pulled out of position, and then find a way to bridge the gap between defending in a low block, which we haven't done all season, basically. Maybe that Liverpool game's the one example of it, and somehow get the ball up to Garnacho, Fernandes, Højlund, Rashford, whoever's playing up front, right? I don't see it. We'll end up with 17% possession or something like that. We're going to Mourinho ball this and Inter against Barcelona in 2010 and win it like that. I just don't see it under Ten Hag. So Chaos Ball, fine. It's just if we concede 25 shots, City are going to score 3.
At least.
So, because, at least, right? Because for all the inconsistency of the City side, and it's not the best City side of the recent years, They have weaknesses. There are plenty of players who scored lots of goals. You've got Foden in the form of his life. Haaland, he's not played that well this season, still got nearly 30 goals. Grealish, who's the best thing he's done all season, is getting drunk on the Etihad pitch. I mean, that's the most effective he's been at doing anything all season. Still made the England squad, by the way. But, so they've got some weaknesses, but they're still going to score 3 if we give them 25 shots. So it's not a way to victory either. This is why I have such a challenge with this, because I'm trying to work out what is the specific plan. If it's not Mourinho ball, chaos ball gives them too many shots. What is it that allows us to find a way to beat this City side that man for man, much better than United? I haven't come with the answer. This is why Eric gets paid £10 million a year. He needs to find the answer before he's fired on Sunday.
Either way, yeah. I have nothing to add. I think I'm in exactly the same place as you. I do. There's a suspicion that I feel like it's probably the most responsible thing to at least try and do what he's done in the last couple of games, because that's what he's got in his brain, and that's what the players are sort of gearing towards. So you might as well just go with it and see what happens. It's obvious. It's obvious that that's not a 90-minute game plan. It would be ridiculous to think that can hold them out. But if it can frustrate them for an hour, then that's where Garnacho and Højlund and maybe Ahmad come in, because, it's a big pitch. They are quite quick. I mean, Walker's still quicker than any of them, but they are quite quick and they can make use of that space. Maybe might be the best way to use Højlund. I don't know. It's just...
Yeah. Yeah, and you got a player there who's got a couple of great goals recently, so he must be feeling confident. I am surprised that Garnacho hasn't had a rest. I mean, he talked about managing Højlund's minutes, did Ten Hag, so it's a bit weird to talk about managing Højlund's minutes, give him 10 minutes twice and then not start him in the final. That'd be very weird. And Garnacho's looked tired recently and could really have done with a week off. Was the game against Brighton so important that he had to play, I don't know. Some of it's weird, and it's the nitpicking that we've done all season with Eric, I think. All right. I guess we'll leave it there. It's not a really in-depth preview, is it? Go check out our Patreon page. I may even open it up for non-Patreon listeners on Saturday morning or something like that. But, we'll see. I'll think about that. We'll see. Little treat for you. Yeah, maybe. All right, everyone. Enjoy the cup final. Where are you watching? Are you going to the game?
I had tickets, but something's come up. So personal issues have come up, so I'll be in Ireland watching it. So looking forward to that, because at least I'll be with my best mate. And if you want some straw clutching of the highest order, the last time United won the FA Cup, I wasn't in the country, so being exiled from. There you go. A sure bet.
There you go. Yeah. Lucky. Well, if we win this one, you will have to leave the country for every subsequent cup final. You know that. I'm not going. I don't know. I'd like to be there, but I don't feel very confident about it. Enjoy it, everyone, wherever you are. I will be in the pub at 6 a.m. Dan will be at the game. You'll be in Ireland on your 75th pint of Guinness by the time kickoff rolls around. Enjoy that. Everyone, do your best to enjoy the weekend, and touch wood, something happens, a miracle. Moments that we got plenty of players who can produce moments of genius. Let's hope that is it. See you, everyone. Bye now.